Welcome to the Putting the Public into Health podcast by Dr. Richard Pan. As we face one of the greatest public health disasters in the century, this podcast will address questions and issues from you, the public, about the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on people's health and lives. I am Dr. Richard Pan. I'm a physician with a background in public health, and I'm proud to represent the people of Sacramento, Elk Grove, West Sacramento, and parts of Sacramento County in the California State Senate. The State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, recently issued guidelines for reopening schools. While Sacramento schools have closed out the school year with distance learning, many parents are wondering what school will be like in the fall. I'm very pleased to have Dave Gordon, Superintendent of the Sacramento County Office of Education, join me. Superintendent Gordon served as Superintendent of Elk Grove Unified School District for 9 years before becoming County Superintendent, and he currently serves on the Sacramento First Five Commission and the board of the Sierra Health Foundation. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he's been working with school districts across Sacramento County to address this pandemic. Thank you so very much, Dave, for joining me.
Happy to be with you, Dr. Pan.
Thank you. So what is the role of the Sacramento County Office of Education in guiding local school districts during the COVID-19 pandemic?
We have been assisting local school districts in building their programs to serve students while students were being taught at home, and more recently, we've been working with them. We've had a task force appointed by superintendents from all of the school districts to look at options for them when they reopen, based largely on advice from the Sacramento County Public Health Officer.
And as I mentioned, the California Department of Education recently issued a guidebook for the safe reopening of public schools. So can you describe what are the state's recommendations for reopening schools?
Well, the state's recommendations came out a little bit after our guideline, but they are a little more general than our guidelines, but they are along the same lines, recommending the sorts of health-related accommodations that would need to be made to make sure the schools are safe for youngsters. For example, one of the major ones is social distancing, making sure that classrooms are empty enough so that students can be placed at least 6 feet apart. That's just one of the considerations.
Now, if you have students 6 feet apart, which is a lot farther than they were before COVID-19, are we looking at schools not being able to hold as many students, or doing shifts, or what are you hearing from school districts about how they're going to address things like the distancing? Are they going to have enough facilities for hand washing? Can you share some of the other details that school districts have to deal with?
Sure. Right now, our 13 school districts are in the process of looking at the various options available to them. Among the things they're looking at is, number one, if parents are uncomfortable sending their children back at all, the school districts will likely have an option to continue the distance learning that's been going on. For bringing students back to school, it's likely that not all students will be able to come and be in the building at once. Because as you said, with social distancing, instead of having 25 or 30 children in a class, you might only be able to have 10 to 15 at any given time. So they're looking at various ways to bring students back for a couple of days a week or part of each day, and allow for the social distancing in that fashion.
Now, I can imagine for the teachers, you have students who are there for some of the time. I don't know if you just rinse and repeat the lesson for the next group of students, and then the ones are distance learning. Are we dividing up our teaching workforce between the different modalities, or how do you see classroom teaching accommodating these particular changes?
Well, there would probably have to be a little of both of those things. The teacher in their class, they would see half of their class, say on a Tuesday, the other half of the class on a Thursday in person. But then they would provide lessons for them in the time they're not at school, so there would be continuity of instruction. Some of the districts are looking at a 4-day schedule, 2 days on for one group, Group A, and then 2 days on for Group B, and possibly a day for teacher prep. A lot of the districts will be looking at Mondays as the day for teacher prep because that's the day on which most of the holidays fall. So that would be least disruptive to the instructional time. Other districts are looking at the possibility of a homeschooling option. A homeschooling option is different from the distance learning because in the homeschooling option, the parent assumes a lot of the responsibility for helping provide the instruction. So I'm very pleased that most of the districts are engaging parents via surveys. So they're trying to get a feel for what is it that parents want. It may be difficult to provide what parents most want, which is every child come back to school. But with the health considerations, if that's not possible, these surveys will hopefully tell our districts what our parent preferences would be.
Now, I realize each school district is perhaps working at their own pace, but is there a sense of when school districts will be able to collect the response from these surveys? Because one of the things I'm wondering about is for a lot of families, there may be a single parent or both parents are working. So if you have a mechanism where either homeschooling isn't going to work if the parents aren't home, and if they're only in school, let's say 2 days out of the week, or how's that going to work with parents who basically are unable to stay at home to watch the kids when the kids aren't at school?
Yeah, those are great questions, and that's one of the reasons why we really pushed to get our guidance document out as quickly as we could, and it came out, as I said, ahead of the states and on June 2nd. So the districts have been working very, very hard for this month, and a lot of them have already put their surveys out. Mm-hmm. And I think they're pushing very hard toward the end of this month to have options available. School starts generally for most of our districts in the middle part of August, the second or third week of August. So if they can be prepared by the end of this month, they would have a whole month to prepare and do whatever modifications are needed to their school facilities.
Now, I don't expect us to get a vaccine by next school year. However, it is possible that with our public health efforts, perhaps we might be able to contain this outbreak sometime in the coming year, or it's possible that the outbreak may spread, in which case schools may be closed down again. But in the event that we're able to contain this outbreak, do you see schools then shifting mid-school year, in some sense doing a mirror image of what happened this year where schools had to close down, that schools could open back up more again? Are there going to be adjustments like that?
Well, I think if school people and all the rest of us have learned anything, we have to be flexible. We have to be nimble. And, I'll just say that everyone wants all kids to be back in school all day. That's the goal. Our kids have been missing that, and if there's a possibility that will be safe, and our public health officials say that will be safe, I'm certain that our districts will adjust as quickly as possible. But for right now, the obligation is to make sure our kids and our staffs, don't forget our teaching staffs and other staffs need to be assured that they're safe as well.
No, that's certainly a very important priority, and I know that many of our teachers and school staff are in high-risk categories, and so we need to keep them safe, and as well as, of course, the children safe, who are basically going to be spending time with each other, although, again, hopefully distanced and masked so that they're not able to transmit germs with each other. Might be a little more of a challenge for the kindergartners and early graders doing that, perhaps.
Yes, Yes, indeed. You need to get over there on your square there for the little ones. Yeah, it's gonna be a challenge, no question, for our teachers. But I think to the degree we can bring back students for any period of time, and they will be comfortable at least seeing their friends, and even if they can't congregate in groups, I think getting back to the familiar face of their teacher and the school routine will be very positive after being stuck at home for weeks at a time.
Now, do you see any summer school classes this summer, or with all the preparation work, summer school's out for this summer?
Some of the districts will be doing summer school. Most of it will probably be for the high school students for what they call credit recovery. If you're short of credits to be able to get your diploma, those sorts of things, and some students who need to accelerate. Some of the districts will be running programs to try to help students who may not have connected as well through the internet connections with the distance learning to do catch up. But the summer school will be pretty modest this year as districts prepare to do a reopening in the best way that they can.
And then what about our special education students? They need special assistance. They come in a range of different services that they may need depending on the student. How do we see students getting their special education services under the new guidelines?
That's going to have to be planned very, very carefully. Now, the special education students were missing a lot of the important in-person services that they depend upon, things like speech therapy, things that didn't go well easily over the distance learning or the Zoom kinds of platforms. So if students can come back for at least part of the time, they will potentially be able to get some of those services. In addition, for our most severely handicapped students, where basically they have a team of staff people working with them, including nurses and so on, we're hoping to be able to create a safe environment for those students, many of whom are medically fragile, and our teaching staff and our nursing staff and others that work with them, because those students were really on their own for a couple of months, which we know was very, very difficult for those families. So people are working very hard to plan how we can bring those students back in a way that's healthy and safe for everyone.
Now, some students may be in special education because they have behavioral issues or challenges in terms of socialization, behavior. Do you see, for example, having to shift the classroom environment for these students, again, because we have to do the physical distancing and some of the other regimens that may be a bit more challenging for these students?
Yeah, very, very, very possibly. It really depends on the profile of the classes of those students. One advantage may be, though, that those classes to begin with are typically smaller. Mm-hmm. So the social distancing may be a little easier to accomplish with those classes.
So what are some of the things that parents should be thinking about in terms of preparing their child for this new school environment? Perhaps over the summer, are there certain habits or things that parents should either be talking to their child about, I guess depending on their age, or habits they should be ingraining in their children during the summer that might make this transition a little easier to this new school environment?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it really has to do with making sure the young people, and of course it's tough with the youngest children, but making sure that children understand that the limitations and restrictions are not being placed upon them to make them uncomfortable or to disrupt their social life or whatever, but they're really for the protection of everybody. their fellow students, our teaching staffs, and most of all, their own families who they will come and go from their family home. That the spread of this disease, one of the biggest preventative measures is distancing. And a lot of our students will be asked to wear masks. Mm-hmm. And that's not easy or always comfortable, and we'll have to work with them on that. But I think the more parents can explain that here's why this is necessary, here's why it's important to protect us all, but also that it's not a permanent condition. It will pass, and it's something we have to do for a while until things improve, and then we'll be back to normal.
Yeah, I'm just thinking children see each other, students see each other at school, and they want to greet each other and hug each other and share secrets and get up close. And with all these new rules, are they going to feel like that some of them are a punishment versus, well, this is really about each other's safety? I think there's certainly a lot of work to be done to help students understand why the rules are there and that they're not there to as a form of punishment or some other thing. It's really about keeping everyone safe and having that lesson taught to the students before they enter the environment where the teacher is trying to watch however many students they will have in the classroom. Even at 6 feet apart in the smaller classroom, there's still a bunch of students together, right?
Yeah, I think that would be great if parents can put that out to their kids and just talk to them about it. And it's going to be difficult all around, but I think they will get used to it. Our teachers, I'm just so proud of everything that our teaching staff has done by shifting on a dime to distance learning. And I've seen some of the things the teachers have done over Zoom and the distance learning platforms. It's just amazing to be able to make that kind of a pivot. And I think when we get going this fall, that they will be able to do the same thing. It's an amazing group of people.
Now, are there efforts to share best practices? I know that when we closed everything down, it was fairly sudden, and a lot of teachers were scrambling to figure things out. I think many of them came up with some very ingenious solutions to figure out how to teach their students. But at the same time, I think it was a huge challenge, right? And students come from so many different backgrounds, and they may or may not have internet connections. They may be in households where they actually have a quiet space to do their distance learning, while others don't. So people are in so many different kinds of circumstances. But as we're leading now into the next school year, do you see efforts to try to take lessons that we learned sort of on the fly and maybe see whether there's things we can do more systematically to make distance learning more effective? And especially since you mentioned with the sort of smaller classrooms, even if your kid is going to school, it sounds to me like they'll still be spending some time doing distance learning, if not doing distance learning full time, just in order to accommodate the number of students that could actually physically be present in the school.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I know that all of our school districts, including us at our county office, are doing whatever we can to improve our capacity to deliver the distance learning, and as you say, learn from one another across districts, but also across our own staffs, because people picked it up differently. Some people picked it up more quickly, and bringing in experts to help tune up their ability to do that going forward, I think is it's something that's going to be with us into the future, and it's something that we can and will learn to do even better and learn from one another.
Now, part of the school experience is after-school programs and or sports or other extracurricular programs. What do you see happening to those types of programs? Are they still going to be able to continue in schools, or given the priority on trying to get everyone taught and the limitations in terms of physical space in schools, those are perhaps going to have to go away for a little while?
I think the after-school programs will generally be fine. The sports and the extracurriculars Some of those will be difficult because of, again, the medical advice. And in our document, if people would like to take a look at it, just go to scoe.net. That's our website, and it's the 2021 planning guide. You can access it there and read it or download it. With the athletics, the medical advice is that some sports where there is distancing available are okay. Other sports will be difficult if the students doing the sport are needing to congregate. But we tried to point out that as of June 2nd, when we released our report, these were the guidelines for whether we could do certain sports or not. Circumstances will change between now and August or September, so that's likely to change the ability of us to get going with other sports. And the California Interscholastic Federation, the CIF, which governs high school athletics, is in charge of all of the leagues and the competitions. We've been working very closely with them, and they held a press event last Friday, and according to CIF, it's a waiting game. They're going to wait to see toward the end of July where things stand with the health advice. And again, the priority will have to be protecting the health of our young people. But circumstances could change, and again, with all of our extracurricular activities, whether it's athletics or band or drama or any of these activities, we know very well there's such a huge part of the school experience. In fact, they're the thing that keeps many of our kids connected to school in the first place. A lot of our kids wouldn't even be at school without what they get out of these activities. In addition, a lot of them are at the heart of the spirit of the school. So we all understand that. And the last thing any educator wants is to have to deny these extracurriculars and athletics. So everybody will do everything they can safely to make sure that they can continue. But it's a waiting game, and it really depends upon the medical advice from both the health officers in the counties, but also the ones who advise the CIF.
Well, thank you so very much for joining me, and thank you so much for sharing this very important information. Certainly recognize that our top goal is to keep people safe and healthy in the schools, and then, of course, getting our kids educated. And in many ways with COVID, we sort of have to wait and see what will happen over the next several months. So really appreciate you sharing and the guidelines that have come out so far, and maybe we'll circle back and see what happens as we get closer to the beginning of the school year. So again, really appreciate it.
I'm happy to, and I'd encourage parents, keep in touch, close touch with your local school and your local school district. They're working hard to put together a plan that will work.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, and I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Putting the Public into Health by Dr. Richard Pan. If you have questions or ideas for a future podcast, please email them to senator.pan@senate.ca.gov. Please stay at home as much as possible. Stay at least 6 feet away from others outside. Wash your hands frequently, wear a mask, and try not to touch your face. Together, we are slowing the spread of the disease and saving lives. Thank you so much for listening.